So good morning, everybody. My name is Federica Cittadino, and I'm a senior researcher at the Institute for Comparative Federalism of Eurac Research in Bolzano. And today it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this morning's session and also our distinguished speakers. And it's also on behalf of my institute, of course, and it's also a pleasure for me to moderate a session on such an important topic such as federalism and climate change, especially at this very moment where the effects of climate change are increasingly more visible. And so it's really important to take action immediately, and for taking action in an effective way, it's also important to discuss the basis for such action. So in this case, the governance of climate change. This is what we are going to explore today with our speakers, and we will hear the extent to which governance and so also the mechanisms of coordination between different institutional actors are important in federal and multi-level systems when it comes to regulate climate change. And we will hear that from our speakers. But before I introduce to you them, I would like to express my gratitude to the Forum of Federations, both because we've been contributing, we've been working together for years, but also because without their support, this roundtable haven't been possible today. So thank you very much. And I also would like to explain to you a little bit the structure of today's roundtable. So first of all, the speakers will introduce themselves. They will have about 10 minutes to explain the link between their work and the topic of today's discussion. Then I will ask them some questions on climate change and federalism and climate governance. After that, you will have some time to ask questions to our speakers, and then there will be some conclusions. So, but let me first, before kicking off the discussion, introduce to you the speakers. Professor Monica Di Gregorio, that you already know, is Associate Professor of Environmental Politics and Governance at the University of Leeds. And she recently co-edited a volume published with Cambridge University Press on climate change and federalism. Then we have Carsten Sieling, which is a member of the board of directors of the Forum of Federations. He has pursued in the past an academic career in the field of economics, and then a political career as member of the Bundestag, so of the national parliament in Germany, and then most recently as member of the state parliament of Bremen. And finally, we have Professor Peter Bußjäger, who's full professor at the University of Innsbruck at the Department of Public Law, State and Administrative Sciences, and is also the director of the Institute for Federalism here in Innsbruck. Is as well member of the Venice Commission of the Council of Europe and member of the Constitutional Court of the Principality of Liechtenstein. And he also recently co-edited a volume on climate change integration and the multi-level governance of Italy and Austria. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Professor Di Gregorio to my left for the introduction.
Thank you very much, Federica, and nice to see you all again this morning. Really, my focus of work has gravitated around multi-level governance and climate change. If you want to put a label on my area, I'm an environmental social scientist, and I'm told that the definition of that is people that engage, researchers that engage in broad transdisciplinary studies of the interrelations between humans and the natural environment. I have an interdisciplinary background in the social sciences, so I started with a degree in economics and with a strong focus on political economy. I then specialized in development economics. And so I had quite a lot of interest in development in the global south on environmental and the link between development and environmental management. And then I did a PhD in international development, also an international, an interdisciplinary field. And I was drawing a lot on environmental sociology and environmental politics in terms of my research that I did at the time. I worked a lot in applied research, starting at the International Food Policy Research Institute in the US, working on natural resource governance quite a few decades ago. And at the time, decentralization was the buzzword in terms of natural resources. And the World Bank, the Natural Resources World Bank program was all about decentralizing governance as a, if you want, a solution to environmental mismanagement. I then moved on to London, to the Department of International Development at the LSE, and there I focused specifically at the role of civil society in both addressing and solving collective action problems, but also in their role in defending rights to livelihoods of local people, looking at the tension between development and environmental protection. And I worked quite a lot in the Indonesian context, and in the Federica was talking about the Cambridge edited book. I contributed a chapter on Indonesia on decentralization and climate governance. And then I moved to the University of Leeds, where I am still now a decade long. It's scary if you think about that. And there I got more and more interested in looking at policy processes as a whole. And so look at which policy actors and how policy actors try to influence environmental policy beyond state actors alone, and what's the role and the interaction with business and civil society. And I've spent the last years really working on multi-level governance of climate change, specifically in relation to land use, which is very relevant in terms of climate change mitigation in the global south. It is the main source of emissions. We don't hear it that much here because in more developed countries, really it's energy is the main culprit, if you want. So that is an area that needs solutions, and there are very difficult trade-offs with livelihoods. And I became increasingly interested in climate policy integration in that regard. I had a number of roles that gave me really the opportunity to collaborate with a broad of other people in other disciplines. And that really directed my interests. I've had long-term collaboration with the Center for International Forestry Research, which looks at forests and livelihoods, if you want, in the tropical belt. And that has, fostered, again, my interest in Indonesia. I've done quite a bit of work in Brazil. I haven't done much work in Africa. And there is, it's a still very understudied area. And it holds, well, after the Amazon, the second largest intact tropical forest. So it's extremely important. I have a PhD student now that does research there, so slowly I might move into that area as well. I've been the co-director of the Sustainability Research Institute at the University of Leeds, which is an institute, it's well, today very large institute. We've grown a lot over the years, and that reflects the importance, increasing importance of sustainability and interdisciplinarity in solving environmental problems in general. And so we have now 60 academic staff plus researchers, and PhD students, and we are hosted within the biggest Earth and Environment school in the UK. I also really treasure outward-looking, I wouldn't say roles, but opportunities to work with and engage with government and businesses. And we have the Priestley Center for Climate Futures at our university, and that deals a lot with actually making connections with government, policymakers, and businesses, as well as civil society, in terms of learning from there what the challenges are in terms of climate action and policy, but also, learning how to translate academic work into useful, which is not easy, useful advice for policymakers. So that's what we're trying to do there. So, as I said, a lot of focus over the year, moving from forest environmental management into climate and forest management. I've been thinking a lot about the difference in climate change responses, which is climate change mitigation and adaptation, and how these differ in terms of the governance structures that we need to have in place, but also the importance to think about integrated approaches. And that's something that's missing. So that goes a little bit under the idea of climate policy integration, but goes further than that in looking really at detail at the internal responses to climate change and how to integrate those. So it's not just about sectoral integration, but really about integration different responses to a problem, which is both of, if you want, looking into the future in terms of addressing the causes, but also having at the same time to address effectively impacts and reducing vulnerability. So we had a really nice question from Federica in terms of maybe reflecting on what we've learned and what are the lessons in terms of multi-level governance.
Maybe we could have a look at that after.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I would like now to hear from the other speakers, their background, and then we will talk about the questions. Thank you very much. Dr. Sieling, the floor is yours. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Federica, and thank you very much for inviting me to this session this morning. I'm representing the Forum of Federations today. The Forum of Federations is an international organization located in Ottawa, Canada, and it was founded about 24 years ago. And it was an initiative of Canada because they had a debate in Canada where they might split up between the French and British part of the country. And so they said, we have to do something to fit it together. And of course, they did different things on their national level. But on the other hand, they gave this idea of developing an international organization. And the member states are 9 or 10, Australia, Brazil, Canada, of course, Ethiopia, Germany, India, Mexico, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Switzerland. So you see a very diverse group, and we do different projects in developing countries, really a long list, Myanmar, in all parts of the world. Myself, I don't work there. I'm the member, or I have this seat in this board of directors for Germany. The federal government of Germany appointed me to get in there because the organization is financed by is financed by the member states, and so every member state had to do different things there. Personally, I was dealing with issues of federal policy and federal development in my whole career. I'm, as Federica mentioned, an economist, studied in Germany, in Bremen, and in Hamburg, and in the US at the University of Maryland. And I did my PhD on regional development and economic policy on the regional level. And after that, I became a politician. I'm from Bremen in Germany. Bremen is one of the 16 Länder, the smallest one in this federal system, and one of the Hanseatic cities in Germany with Hamburg, and of the city-states. I mean, out of these 16 states in Germany, you might know there are 3 city-states: Berlin, Hamburg, and Bremen. And I became member of parliament there on the local or the Länder parliament, and later on I did it on the national level, and I was mayor and we call it president of the Senate for the whole land in between 2015 and 2019. So and there we had to deal, and I had to deal with all these issues of federalism, especially of the financial side. How do you go on with the money? How do you raise the taxes and the money, and how do you distribute it then between the national level and all these member states? And that's a quite important thing, even for our topic today, for preventing climate change, because climate change will or has the need to invest in a very big manner. You have to build up new infrastructures, completely new situations. And in the last years, I was up to May last year, member of our parliament in Bremen, and we had an enquete commission, inquiry commission on with the main question: what can a land, can a region, can what can we do on the local level to prevent climate change and to develop measures of mitigation? We did this with in this commission over 2 years, and there is a big report. You can find it in the internet, of course, unfortunately just in German, but you can find it there. It's about 400 pages. And there, in this commission, let me say this, we have been 9 members of parliament, elected members of parliament, and 9 experts from different universities, from different institutions all over Germany, just German people, but very, very good experts. And this commission debates about conversion on the industrial sector, how to set up the infrastructure for energy, and about traffic, about land use and building, to how to deal with all these buildings who are not ready for the time where you have to save and to reduce your energy. The energy you use. And now this, so we developed a plan in that way with the costs for this as well. I can tell it later. And now the Senate, the government of Bremen, and the Parliament now has to develop all these measures and to bring it into work and realize these things. That's a really interesting thing, and it's of course connected with all the measures, measures the federal government is doing and the federal level is processing. Okay, that's, but maybe finally let's make, I would like to do the statement that if it should be possible to, or if it shall be possible to reduce, or to stop the climate change and reduce the carbon impact, then we have to put together all our power and all our ideas to realize it. And on the local level, that's the chance for federal systems, because there you can mobilize the people, the companies, the economy, the political scene to do things and to set up things to prevent climate change. And I think that's a very important or the most important issue in these days, and we have to do it to prevent our world. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Now, Professor Bußjäger, you have the floor.
Thank you. Yes, I was introduced, and I want to tell you something about my personal background regarding environmental law and climate change protection. As you have heard, I am professor at the University of Innsbruck in the Department of Public Law, and my main research fields there are constitutional law and environmental law and administrative sciences and administrative theory. And you have also heard I am director of the Institute of Federalism in Innsbruck. It's not an institute of the university, it's a separate entity. It is financed by 5 of the 9 Austrian Länder. And we are doing research on federalism since 50 years. Not only my person, but I am director since the year 2000. And so you can see, since many years. And from the beginning of my academic work, I was very interested in environmental law, especially in the law on nature protection. And this is an important competence of the Länder in the Austrian Federation. And I remember one of my first papers I have written as director of the Institute of Federalism, I think it was about 20 years ago, was a short paper on subsidies for buildings, state subsidies for buildings, and the connection with climate protection. And you see, the discussion on climate change and climate protection is very old. It's not at all new. It's more than 25 years or 30 years old, this discussion. And I was not the first dealing with the topic. And but I only wanted to mention because it demonstrates that I saw from the beginning that that we have to deal. If you deal with federalism, we have also to discuss climate change, and I am still working on this topic. We have several publications, conferences dealing with this matter. I'm advertising a book in German, Climate Change and Federalism. I think it was mentioned before that that is an interesting topic. And I was very happy that I was part of the project, which was mentioned by Federica, climate change integration in the multi-level governance of Italy and Austria. Federica was the leader of the project and the main editor, and with the most work on it. I had also work, but not so as, but not in this way as Federica. So I am dealing with the topic, and it is in Austria, but I think not only in Austria, but also in other countries. I think in Germany it is the same. In Austria, federalism is regarded as an obstacle towards effective measures on combating the climate change. Because if you need urgent decisions, federalism might be not the right solution for this. And so I am interested in how can we use federalism as a tool against climate change. And it was mentioned before by Carsten. He said we need the subnational entities to implement measures to be taken against climate change. And so I focused my research on the question, how can we introduce a system of governance that is able to implement the effective measures against climate change. And on the background of the Austrian division of competences, we have on the land level very important competences regarding this material. Also, we have compared with Switzerland, for example, or Belgium, we have a very centralized federal system. But for example, the competences on spatial planning regarding land use, it was mentioned before as a very important topic. This is a competence of the lander, as well as the laws on nature protection. And this is why this, from my point of view, so important that we deal with federalism and we look how can we use federalism as an innovation lab, and how can we come to a governance system in a federal system that that is able to introduce effective measures against the climate change.
Thanks a lot. So I think we've heard already two very important words. One is innovation, so experimentation that may come from federalism and the fact that climate change is addressed by different levels of government and different actors. And also the role of the subnational level in this respect. And the importance of different policies that are not focusing in themselves on climate change, but may have an effect on climate change. And I prepared some questions for our speakers to explore all of these elements. Initially, I thought that I would ask them one by one, but now I'm reading them all, and I will leave each speaker the freedom to address them how they want, and to pick up on the different elements in the way they want. So, and these questions all concern governance and the role of different actors. So first of all, who are these different actors? So in your view, what are the main institutional actors that may contribute to the governance of climate change and to climate protection, either directly or indirectly? And here I'm referring both to governmental actors, so the subnational and the local levels, as we heard, but also to non-governmental actors. So we may cite civil society or businesses, as it was done before. And in particular, what is the role of these actors in policy making and implementation? The second question deals with the main obstacles to the good operation of all these actors, because all these actors have to cooperate, and also the different policy sectors involved in climate change protection have to be coordinated with one another if we want to achieve some results in terms of effective implementation of climate protection measures. So what are the main obstacles to that kind of cooperation and coordination? And the other side of the coin, what are the best means to achieve such coordination? And if you have specific examples on that. Then a small question related to that is whether you think that coordination is the main factor to be addressed when talking about an effective climate change governance, or if you think that there are other factors that need to be addressed. And then the last question is about the role of the judiciary. So judges and courts, I'm sure you've heard a lot about climate litigation and cases concerning the responsibilities of different governmental actors, but also businesses before national and international courts. And I'd like to know from you and from your experience if you think that this kind of litigation may improve coherence across levels of government in federal and multi-level systems. So if it may provide some elements of innovation in the dynamics of the different levels. So if you agree, I would continue with the same order. So I will give the floor first to Monica, then to Carsten, then to Peter. Thank you.
Thanks, Federica. So we try and answer all three.
Yes.
Yeah, together.
All three.
Yeah, I would do that because I understood that maybe it's better for you to address all issues together and to pick up on the elements you may have more to say, more experience, more examples to share.
All right, thank you. So which actors are key in issues related to federalism and climate governance? Now, given the nature of the environmental problem, which is climate change is a multi-sectoral and multi-level problem. And so the list is quite long of actors in many ways. Certainly, obviously, ministries of environment are crucial, but Ministry of Finance within the state actors. But Ministry of Finance are very important as well in terms of resourcing. Where I work in the Global South, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is actually key as well in state structures. And that's because the majority of funding for climate change in the Global South actually comes from aid. And that's really very, very important in terms of how global powers then also affect policies in many ways. What we've seen is also that the chief of the executive is key. We've seen incredible changes in terms and switches in terms of position on climate change with changes of government, okay? And if you want the political dispositions of governments, we have seen U-turns in Australia, in Brazil. The US has always been on the fringe, but has, with big variations. So that's really important. Now, I have a pluralistic view of policy processes. I think that government alone doesn't determine policy. The importance of the business sector is huge because of the economic interests we know. Business sector interests operate very much in the shadows. Even researchers know quite little about that because they don't like to advertise their positions, especially if you are, contributing to the problem. But governments, business has a lot of structural power, and so government has to incorporate the interests of business, also for economic growth purposes, if you want, in the end. And finally, we have civil society. Civil society is key, especially in facilitating interactions between actors, that is reaching out, especially reaching out downward towards the local level. It's also key in terms of implementing climate change policies. And finally, obviously, as we've seen in the last years, it's very important in terms of raising public awareness and, if you want, demanding climate action. And that's what gives especially democratic governments the justification, it is the support from civil society, the justification to take very tough decisions in terms of changing economic structures and planning for long-term futures. So that's one. The second one was coordination. So the questions become more and more difficult. What facilitates coordination? Well, we are in a meeting on federalism and climate change. And so polity structures in terms of decentralization, devolution set really the basic form of how polities are actually organized in terms of facilitating coordination across levels of governance, distribution of power and authority in that. Whatever level of decentralization in a polity and organizational structures to facilitate policymaking in climate change, we always need additional institutions that further facilitate both horizontal communication between across constituent units, for example, but also vertically. State administration is organized by sectors largely, which is very, very useful to administer a lot of problems, not so much for climate change. And that's where you need horizontal structures and we see a lot of that. We see interministerial committees have been set up, but also at second-tier governments, we see more and more states and provinces getting together, both to exchange information, to share policy innovation, but also to try to impact national policies primarily. And more and more they also use links to global processes. And so it is second-tier governments getting together and trying to interact with global actors, increasingly so. We have the covenant of mayors at the local level, but we have also very strong examples. In my area of work, we have the Governors Climate and Forest Task Force, which started in the Brazilian Amazon as a separate organization, now covers 10 different countries, four of which are federated republics, and the rest are very decentralized countries as well. And that's not a fluke in a sense. It is because they have, as second-tier governments, quite a lot of autonomy in making decisions on climate change, and so have more opportunities to do that. Last question.
On the role of courts in these dynamics, or I mean,
judicial courts, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to be very short here because it's not my area, and I know there is much more that my other colleagues can say to that. Just an observation, which is we observe more and more the judicial system being used to advocate for climate action. And that's again, here the importance of civil society comes out again, because a lot of these discussions are actually instigated by civil society. And so they are really our watchdogs, if you want, and perform a very important area. And as we have more and more climate change legislation, and as climate change becomes really at the core of both sectoral policies, but of general government policies, we'll see more and more the opportunities to use the judicial system to actually create change in that regard. Yes, I'm going to stop here.
thank you very much. I would invite the other speakers to express their views, and then maybe we will have some follow-up questions from me and then from the public.
Yes. Great. Let's do it that way. For the first to the first question of the actors, Monica was saying very important things, so I can go on to it. And the very important thing, if you look on society, you have to realize that's not just the political scene, it's the economy as well. I mean, we to change the way of producing and to change the way of consuming needs a different way to develop the products and to produce. Even if you want to, you have to change your consumption. You need the alternative option. So this is not be done by just a political decision, or to say, oh, you all have to behave in another way in future. You have really change it. So you need the economy as well, and you have to give incentives and to give support and to give rules as well to change this. And therefore, of course, the actors, or it's an issue of resources, because you have to give these different actors the possibility to really to do the investment and to do all the organizational change which is necessary, and so on and so on. But today we discuss it with the issue of federalism here, of federalism and the chances federalism has in this context. Because in a democratic society and in a democratic system, you never have this situation, and it's good that you centralized way tomorrow. Wherever you have made and maybe changes because there are elections and you get a new government with new ideas and things like this. And so in this context, the chance of federalism and federal organized state is especially in the first phase, in the first time of these Herausforderungen, these challenges, thank you very much, is that you can develop different ways. The local body, the decentralized body can and level can develop an idea, and the other one another idea. So you get a organized competition of good ways to manage the prevention of climate change. That's a chance which you have in federal system, and which is mobilizing different actors and more actors than in a centralized way. I would add to the things Monica. Of course, you have to deal with all these multi-level issues and things. I would see three advantages in a federal organized society and society and nation. The first is that you can better react. You can tailoring these process. The second one is that if there is a failure in one way, you have the chance to compensate it through better solutions. And of course, I mean, on the federal level, somebody can do a mistake. But if you have a unitary state and this state fails, then it fails all. And in the other way, you have another situation. And the third thing is you can, and this is related to the other points, you can develop different experiments. You can try how to deal with it. And how can we develop? I mean, take the debates in the traffic sector. Paris now decides no big cars or a parking for big cars is very expensive. Other cities in the north, Copenhagen is a city where you have a lot of traffic by bike. They support bikes, and other big cities support more public transportation, and so on and so on. And you can develop solutions which are fit into the situation and fit in to the society and to the will of the people in this constituency. Okay, and so the second system with a vertical and horizontal coordination, and of course you have to have these coordination. If you get out of this phase of and this situation of experimentation, you have to develop ways, and if you want to realize the big changes, and I like to give you an example. In Bremen, where I'm from, we have it's a state with 680,000 people. So it's not very big, but we have a big steel company. And this steel company is responsible for 50% of the GHG and of the pollution, 50%. So of course you could say the company is ArcelorMittal. It's a very international company which is located in London, and it's owned by an Indian Mittal, an Indian family. Okay, they can say, okay, then if you don't want these pollution anymore, then we go to another country in the world. But that doesn't solve the problem. We have to reduce. And so, of course, we and in Germany and in Europe general, there are these goals to reduce. But that's a quite expensive thing, and there is coordination important. In Germany, it works in that way that the national government finances. I mean, the government itself has to finance. It's an amount. Let's say 2.5 billion euros. 2.5 billion euros, and therefore the public money will be around 1.2 billion euros. The European Union, so the multi-level situation, the European Union has to accept it, and it's one of the IPCC projects that are the projects of common European interests, and then has to finance as well. And so you see, you have to have financial power on all these levels. You mentioned the most important thing is, or the actor is, or a more and more important actor is the finance department, and that's right. That's right, because you need this. Otherwise, we have a situation where this change won't happen, and that wouldn't be very good for preventing climate change. So there you see, you have to have then, if you develop the measures, if you implement this, you have to have the cooperation, and you can't go just by yourself. Of course, in other fields, maybe land use, maybe buildings is more, these are all connected and integrated. So a good federal system has to cooperate, and it has to have competition in a very regulated way. Competition is there necessary and gives good incentives, but it has to be regulated, and it has to be organized, I would say. So, and then we are with this third question, of course, if you know where to go to prevent climate change, then you develop different legislations and laws, but then we have to see how it works. That's the situation by now. I would say in Germany we have a very big debate about different things, because if you do measurements where you raise prices, or you do extra taxes on the GHG products, I say, then it might lead to a situation where people with a lower income have bigger problems to go in their lives, and that you. I mean, if you do it too strong, then the government will not be re-elected, and then the government will be elected which don't prevent and support all this climate change. That's the first thing. Is the second is you need these resources, and therefore you need the financial power. And where do you get the money? In Europe in general, and in Germany especially, we have this debate about a debt break, not to spend too much money on loans and so on, and so this is one of the biggest problems we have now, because then the necessary investment won't be taken, and that is for the future generations the most difficult thing, and the most negative thing. So, and now we discuss, or you give you.
I will focus my answers on some. I'm a lawyer, and on legal questions, and Clearly, in the European system of multi-level governance, all levels are relevant, are important. Usually we speak about 4 levels of government: European level, state national level, regional land level, and municipal level. When it comes to climate change, we also have to take the international level into account. And it's clearly, I have mentioned before that it is very important to make use of federalism as an innovation lab. And it was mentioned federalism by Carsten has mentioned federalism as competition, as a system of competition. Yes, and he said you have to regulate competition. You have always to regulate competition, also in economics. But my concept as federalism as an innovation lab deals not so with aspects of competition, but with innovation. And then it works if federalism and the respective federation is constructed as a learning system or works as a learning system. These are factors which are cannot guaranteed by the constitution. It depends on the respective political culture. And against the background of the Austrian Federation, I would say we have there's still space for more learning in this system. Actually, we find that federalism works as an innovation lab. For example, in the spatial planning, we are now inventing new tools for energy planning on the regional level, because the competences I have said are settled on the land level, but there's still something to do, I would say. One aspect of federalism is, at least regarding with the Austrian situation, is the factor of trust in government. We have all polls we have in the Austrian society have the same result, that people do not trust in the European level, or have few trust in the European level. They have a decreasing trust in the federal government. It was much more better some years ago. Currently, we have the federal government performance is as bad as the European level in the aspects, in the view of the people. And we have much more trust on land level, and the best trust of people they have in the municipal level. They have there's also an aspect of the views of the people regarding corruption, and they say corruption is settled on the federal level, but not here in my municipality. This might be wrong, but we can make use of trust in government, and from this point of view, municipalities and land authorities are very crucial. And if you compare it with Switzerland, as far as I know, Switzerland is the land in the world with the most trust of the people in government. You see, there's not only federalism responsible for this situation, but also direct democracy. But you see, if you have small entities, you have more trust, and then you can you can implement the consciousness that we have to combat the climate change. And this consciousness is very important, and in the civil society, in the people, and from clearly regarding climate change, also the civil society plays a crucial role. It's very clear. Huh? Yesterday, I got a mail from a young person. She said, "You do not remember me. I was your student, and I was protesting in the state parliament of Vorarlberg, and I got a fine." And clearly, it's forbidden to protest in a parliament. And she got a fine, a punishment of several euros, and she appealed to the administrative court of the land, and she was successful. And now the authority is appealing against this decision to the highest court, and she asked me what to do. And on this example, you see there's a civil society plays in the aspects of climate change a very important role. And coming to the second question, if you make use of federalism as an innovation tool, then you have the problem that the measures taken against the climate change are not coherent, are there that might be not coherent, that there are lacking coordination in vertical aspects as well as in horizontal aspects. And coming back to Austria, I would say there is clearly a need for more cooperation. I see the responsibility, from my perspective, primarily on the federal government level. I would say the responsible ministry for climate change and climate protection could do more in the direction of creating a governance system in which all players are involved and getting to good results. But we also need, and I come back to the culture, we also need a certain leadership in our land, on the subnational level, in the municipalities. Take, for example, the city you are here. In this city, we have, this is the largest city in Austria with a green mayor, but the green mayor, he has no majority. He's mayor due to the votes of the young people studying in Innsbruck, of your colleagues, and maybe not so of the professors. And he has no majority in the municipal councils. So you have, I do not want to say that he has leadership, but you need leadership to come to a result that this, in which this important city for Austria in Innsbruck can bring more measures for combating the climate change. And what can we do? We can invest in renewable energies, and that is one question in which I criticize the statements of the Federal Ministry for Climate Protection. They say in the western part of Austria we have no wind energy. Huh? We have you see no wind wheel in Tyrol. You see no wind wheel in Salzburg or in Vorarlberg. You see many stations for the lifts and for the skiing resorts and so on, but no wind wheels. We do not need wind wheels. We have not the adequate conditions for using wind energy, but we use and we can make use of hydropower, we can make use of solar power, and so you need very and it comes again to federalism. You need the right decisions on the to be taken, and the regional level is a very well-suited tool for such measures. And coming to the last question, it was mentioned that I am member of the Constitutional Court of the Principality of Liechtenstein. It's not a very, it's a very small country. It has 40,000 inhabitants, and we have, I'm not a Liechtenstein national, but I'm Austrian, but I am allowed to work in the Constitutional Court, and the country has 160 square kilometers. Our cases have, in only few cases, have to do with environmental law. Most cases have to do with financial aspects, tax fraud, and so on. I'm very skeptical of the role of constitutional courts or courts in general regarding climate protection. Courts should not intervene in politics, from my point of view. The role of constitutional courts is to protect the rights of citizens, to review laws under aspects of their constitutionality. And I'm aware Article 2 of the European Convention of Human Rights says that gives the right that you can interpret in Article 2 that the states have the obligation to protect the lives of their citizens. Okay, but this is a very general approach. And how would you make use of it in aspects of climate change? What should the Constitutional Court do? In Liechtenstein, you have no highways. For example, in the Austrian Constitutional Court, there's a discussion. We have a speed limit on 130 kilometers. In Germany, you have no speed limit. You are in Germany. Citizens are free. In Austria, they are not free. And even in Austria, we have the discussion to reduce the speed limit from 130 to 100. It would be an easy measure for climate protection. So I am very I'm neutral in this point. And how could the Austrian Constitutional Court come to such a decision that 130 kilometers speed limit is unconstitutional? He could only make use of Article 2, European Convention of Human Rights, maybe Article 8, protection of private life. And but he is a so-called negative lawmaker. He cannot introduce a new law. He can only say, this law is not constitutional, and lawmaker make something new. And but he could also say, okay, speed limit is okay. We have enough other options. We can make use. We can interdict new central heating with gas, with oil or gas. And this would also be an efficient measure. So what should the Constitutional Court do? It's a matter of politics. The politics has to deal with it. I know we can. There are other meanings and other views in this aspect, but I'm rather skeptically about the role of courts in this matter. It does not compensate. It cannot compensate the role of democracy and the role of the elected parliaments and the people in this aspect.
So thank you very much for all these very interesting inputs. I would now briefly comment on the points that I think that are more interesting. You raised so many points, but I would now concentrate only on a few of them. And then I will open, after a brief round of answers from your side, I will open the floor to the public. So first of all, something that Monica said, the role of civil society. I think it's particularly interesting what you said, that civil society, of course, can be a catalyst for, interactions among different actors, and also for raising awareness. But you also mentioned the role of civil society in implementation of climate laws and regulation, and I would be interested in hearing more if you have some concrete examples on that. I was also I'm also curious about the Inquiry Commission you mentioned, and the results that this commission reached. So if there are some particular factors that you would like to mention, or areas that this commission has identified as important for a lender to regulate or to intervene on. And I also wanted to briefly comment on what you said, the importance of businesses to change consumption and production patterns. And this is also, of course, linked to finance and the role of civil society, because these transitions need to be accompanied in a way and to be financed, also to be equitable. And we are seeing that nowadays with this protests of farmers in Europe that somehow are steering the European environmental policies at this very moment. So it's also a matter of acceptance, of course, but also financing. So just a brief comment on that. And then I also would like to comment on the last point raised by Peter, so the role of courts. And I want to give you an example. The case Neubauer versus Germany of the German Constitutional Court, where actually the court did what you were saying, that is to express its views on the way in which climate policies and climate laws are impacting individual rights, and also it judged the German climate law in terms of its compatibility with Article 28, so the protection of the environment, which is a value of the German constitutional system, and it is a value of many European and global constitutional systems. So here I can see that even though courts cannot steer the legislative process, meaning that they cannot, of course, produce new laws, but they can encourage state parliament to act, and this has happened, and I think it's happening more and more. These are my comments, and I thank you again for your very interesting inputs.
Thanks, Federica. So a few more words on the role of civil society and some examples in terms of implementation. I'm going to draw from the area I work on, which is land use, climate and forest in the Global South. So as I said earlier, the vast majority of the funding for climate change in the global south comes from multilateral or bilateral sources. Now, the money is channeled both through to government, but a lot of the money also bypasses government and goes directly to civil society. That's a little bit of a double-edged sword, but in practice, projects, climate change, adaptation and mitigation projects are largely implemented by non-governmental organizations, both international and domestic ones. There is a issue with democracy in a way and bypassing the state when we use civil society, especially international organizations, to implement national policies. But that is the reality, if you want, at the moment. Obviously, the areas, the examples where it works best is when civil society works with local governments. And we have examples of that, much more on mitigation, I'd say, than on adaptation. On adaptation, I think there is a little bit more tension between the, if you want, the objectives of, if you want, large international NGOs. There is a lot of work, much more work by domestic NGOs that work on livelihoods in that sense in my area. So in the area of climate change mitigation in forests, which is in reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, the major UN pilot projects, all of the UN pilot projects were led by international NGOs. And so you can see also, well, the power that they have, both because they bring the financial resources locally and the responsibility that they have in that. So I'm going to stop here.
Yeah, you ask for the, in a way, for the results of our enquete commission or inquiry commission, and how we debated it. I will say there are fields where we had a big consensus, and there are fields with a lot of conflicts, of course. And a field of consensus was, for example, this industrial transition process. There was a big consensus that it has to be made, but on the other hand, to implement then this process is quite costly, and as I described with the steel industry, not an easy thing, and you need the cooperation with the business sector and all these elements. To the other aspects, I mean, we proposed, of course, a change in the heating system and in the energy system, and there was the proposal to develop district energy system, or to improve it. We have a district energy system and a long distance thing in both cities. I mean, it's a city state, as I said, consistent of Bremerhaven and Bremen. So two cities, 580,000 and 120,000 inhabitants. So you get an impression of the size. And on the other hand, then there was this debate, and there was more, it was more sensible, the issue. What should we allow? How long should we allow heating by oil or heating by gas? And should people get restricted on this side, and should they have to implement heat pumps in what way ever? This is much more difficult because it affects the families, your inhabitants, and it's not an easy thing. And even in Bremen, even if it's a biggest city, we have 43% of the people live in her own houses. That's a high level for Germany, because in Berlin, for example, it's they are just 18%. The others are living in apartments, rented apartments, of course. And 43% is a high level. And so if you say to have 43% of your inhabitants, you have to change, and you cannot do it anymore. It's a difficult thing. And of course, in all this energy change, I mean, we have a lot of wind energy in Bremen, even if it's consistent onshore wind, even if it's city-state. But we have the chance to develop much more the offshore wind energy on the North Sea. And there the port infrastructure is important, and you cannot do it on a local level. You have to do it in cooperation. This is a field of cooperation with the federal level, of course. But the debate and the necessity to develop solar and to develop more wind, onshore wind, and there was a debate, of course. I mean, if we develop more onshore wind, then we have a conflict with the land use concerning the nature, and concerning the agriculture sector, which is small in a city like Bremen, but connected to the climate change issue. There is the chance to produce regional products, and this was an issue in this enquete commission as well, to produce on a regional level, and so to reduce GHG in transporting and things like this. And the biggest conflict field was the traffic sector. There have been some of the experts. They said you have to reduce the number of cars up to 2030 to a half. But we have a situation that in Germany, and I don't know how it is in other these European countries, that the number of cars is improving anymore. That's not good. It's really a mess, no issue. But to say, okay, we now say no, we don't stop this growth. We reduce it to the half. That's not possible to realize politically, and so we had a big debate there about the recommendations from the scientific experts with a part of the policy. I mean, there was a debate between the Green members, the Green Party members in the Commission, and the rest of the Commission, mainly because it's a really sensitive issue. Nevertheless, the main thing then is, for example, how could you change the commuting system, that people get to work? How could you implement a system in cities which will work therefore, because the traffic system, the public transportation, is organized in all cities in the world to the center of the city. But very often you have the companies and the production plants with, we have a big plant of Mercedes-Benz with 12,000 people. It's nearly impossible, and it's on the border of the city. It's nearly impossible to get there by public transportation. And with the steel company, it's the same. And we have air and space. It's the same. So you have to develop a completely new system there, and to improve. Not just building up lines by metro lines or things like this. You have to deal with buses. You have to deal with systems where people leave their car outside and then get into things because people come from the countryside. It's much more difficult to develop a new traffic system than just to say we reduce the cars to 50%. That's much more complicated, and it needs more time. And that's another issue in this climate change thing. The European Union by now has this debate: what can we reach to 2040 to 2050, and what can we reach up to 2030, because we don't have any time. I mean, it's a very warm day today.
Before I try to answer the question, I want to come back to what something Carsten said. What he said, he told us about the central heatings by oil and gas in Germany, and this is an example from my point of view, that federalism can work as an innovation lab. The legal situation in Austria was this, that one land, it was Lower Austria, invented, so to say, that no new oil central heatings were allowed from, I don't know, within a relative short period. And then the federation came and made it by constitutional law to a regulation on the whole federal level. And yes, you can see it was an innovation. It worked, and then it was implemented statewide. And now coming back to the courts, the decision of the German Bundesverfassungsgericht is clearly very interesting. But you have always to bear in mind, a constitutional court has to interpret constitutional law, and he interpreted Article 28, and yes, if you interpret it, you can say. If the state does not take appropriate measures against the climate change, then he acts unconstitutional. It's very interesting to compare it with a decision of the Austrian Constitutional Court in 2017, some years ago. It dealt with the enhancement of the airport in Vienna. There should be built a new third runway. The decision is to find in the internet with dritte Piste, third runway, and clear. There are coming more flights to Vienna, more tourists, and so on. And therefore, you need a third runway. And the administrative court, the competent administrative court, refused the consent of this third runway because of one of the reasons was climate change, climate protection. From the view of the court, the runway was not compatible with the interests of climate protection. And the administrative court referred to a provision similar to Article 20a of Grundgesetz. It was a constitutional provision in Austrian constitutional law, and the court also referred to a concrete constitutional provision in the land constitution of Lower Austria, where the airport is settled, and the constitutional provision was also to protect the climate against. The Constitutional Court said no. The regulation, the provision in the land constitution was not relevant, and the provision in the constitutional law of the federal constitutional law has to be interpreted not so clear, and it is only a state goal, and you can reach this goal or not, but it's not from a legal perspective normative relevant. And so he abolished the decision, and finally, and the administrative court had to deal again, and finally, 3 years later, the consent was given for the runway, and several weeks later, the corona pandemic broke out, and nobody needed any runway, and so the third runway is still not, and I do not expect that the third runway will be built in future. So you have different approaches of the constitutional courts, and independent of this different approaches of the Bundesverfassungsgericht and the Austrian Verfassungsgerichtshof, I would say it depends, lastly, on the law. And I would appeal to politics to establish concrete provisions in the constitutions combating the climate change, and then also the constitutional courts will have to interpret these norms in the light of the aim of these norms.
Thanks a lot. So now it is your turn to pose the questions that came into your minds. So please don't be shy, raise your hands and take this opportunity.
Good morning. Thank you so much for this very insightful session. I have lots of food for thought now. I have a two-pronged question, actually. Firstly, I was very intrigued when Professor Monica mentioned how global powers have a key role to play, specifically in the context of the Global South, when it comes to multi-level governance. I was wondering, is there any centrality to the argument of colonialism when it comes to discussing the trade-off and decarbonization initiatives? Because if we look at some of the examples, like for instance, when the demand for electric vehicles increases in Europe, that means that the mining for cobalt and lithium increases in Latin America and Africa. So I'm trying to understand if there is this historical colonial modes of extractionism, which is translated into a colonial capitalism of sorts, if there is some centrality of this argument within maybe the global governance instruments or any other conversation like that. And the second question that I have is mostly about post-colonial federal states. Now, from the discussion, I picked up that the federalism is very deeply situated within institutionalism. Now, in post-colonial states, historical institutionalism and part dependency also gives us institutions that have imperial premises, which were based on sufficient control for efficient extraction, for instance. So when such notorious aspects have crept into some of our institutions, I was wondering if you have any thoughts on how to maybe tackle that, or if there's been any discussion around this in any of the global sort of federalism chambers and instruments. Thank you.
Should we collect questions?
Maybe we can collect another question. Yeah.
Hi. Well, thank you for your comments and reflections. As my partner says, a lot of food for thought. I was just thinking when you commented that courts shouldn't be so political. For example, in Mexico, we have some cases where the Federal Ministry of Education is producing books which talk about, for example, new forms of family, monoparental family, homoparental families, etc. And some states are, resisting the distribution of these books, which are like textbooks for kids in basic education. So, how apolitical can the judiciary actually be, right? Because this line is also party line between, the most left-leaning party and the most right-leaning party, which has, one has the presidency, one has the governorship. So maybe how can apolitical the judiciary be, especially in the Latin American context? We have this phenomenon of just judiciary. I forgot the word in English, but judiciary sort of being degraded after producing many decisions. So how can it be so apolitical? And the other is if Professor Monica has noticed any sort of interactions between the states and the Federal Ministry of Foreign Relations regarding the most of income regarding environmental sustainability projects are aid. So, for example, in Mexico, the states are forbidden from taking this sort of aid if it's supposed to be debt. So is there any relation regarding states being prohibited from accepting some sort of aid if it has, or if it relates in some way to contracting debt or any indebtedness in the future? So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start. Well, thank you very much for the questions. A very, very interesting question on decolonialization, especially in the area I work on in land use and climate change. In the two countries where I work most with, which are Indonesia and Brazil, we have the legacy of colonization in the economic model. And as you rightly said, national government after colonization, national government adopted the same model, which is a model of exploitation of the periphery by the core. And that's what has pushed economic growth, at the same time environmental degradation. And we have very strong past dependencies there, right? Power structures and so on. And at the time, a very centralized system. So although today we have, a federal government in Brazil and a very decentralized government in Indonesia, and I think I can say that decentralization and devolution has helped to reduce, if you want, the legacy of colonialism, which is to have an external or faraway center actually determining and controlling the territory. That I think federalism and decentralization help in that. But it's very, very, very hard to change the political economy. And so what we see is that in states, second-tier governments, in federal states, which are highly dependent on exploitation of these resources that contribute to emissions, there is very, very strong resistance and conflict. I mean, in Brazil, you have, murders still within civil society, indigenous areas that are going on, and these are linked to continuous extractivist, if you want, patterns. But I think decentralization doesn't solve the issue, but it brings government, as we heard, closer to the people in many ways. And, direct elections, for example, also help to increase representation of localities. So it's a long journey and a very heavy legacy, I'd say, yeah. Right. Did somebody else want to answer it? Or
So the second question?
yeah, I can. Yeah, all right. Then I go just very briefly on the issue of foreign relations and the relation with states. I think what we see, what I observe, is central governments being very reluctant to disperse resources to second-tier governments or they do it at their own, under their own rules, if you want, in terms of multilateral funding. There's always a tug of war across government levels. I think federalism helps there again, because second-tier governments have autonomy, some sort of autonomy, they have more authority, and they have a stronger voice in the end. And so they can, compared to a decentralized system, which, and so where you have mainly second-tier governments really doing implementation only. And so it will help, but I think there is a lot of resistance. There's always been a lot of resistance by central government. What we see in the history of devolution of natural resources is that there was a strong push, but the biggest lack of success we have, because really they have devolved cost, but they haven't devolved authority and resources, right? And that is the politics behind decentralization. And so I think your observation is really important. It also underlies the importance of resources to tackling climate change at the local level. You need resources, you need autonomy, and you need expertise as well. And expertise is particularly important for climate change adaptation, that maybe we talked a little bit less, because it's much more complex in terms of responses compared to mitigation. So, yeah.
I agree very much with these answers of Monica, and let me say it in that way. Yes, should work. And let me say it in that way, that the colonialism is a centralized issue. I mean, that's it's a centralized order to press the people and to press different traditions together. And then, in my opinion, I'm not an expert on this, but in my view, the post-colonial structures are, in the first instance, very centralized as well, of course. I mean, because they got them in power, but there's no change in the structures. And indeed, it's a difficult thing, as Monica mentioned, to develop decentralized and federal structures, because the central power doesn't like it. But on the other hand, I would say that decentralizing and federalism is a peacekeeping issue. A peacekeeping issue, because the conflicts and the interests and the different traditions and the needs of the people, you can't press them all over the time. I mean, we see it with all these conflicts in the world, in Africa, in the sub-Sahara situation. Of course, I mean, it's very much there are very much supported by religious issues and other maybe or mostly. And not very positive situations, of course, but it's a result of this. And if you would have organized it quite early, we tried it as the form of federations has different had different projects, and some of them really were very sad. For example, our people told me that they worked in Ethiopia to develop kind of federalism, kind of decentralized situation, and then the conflict brought up, and then they had this civil war or this war in there. But there isn't, in my opinion, no alternative. You have to throw down the colonial structures to give the people then chance, and to give peace a chance, and in the last instance to give the efforts for climate change a chance as well. So this is really necessary, and then you have to give them the resources. And I understood this this example of the question from you from the Mexican perspective, that of course, I mean, if you don't give money then to the local level, to the decentralized level, and you don't give the competence to decide, that then it doesn't help. I mean, and if just a centralized government gives them money here or there, like the political friends are distributed, that's or as the political friends are distributed, that is not federalism, is not decentralization, that is an authoritarian system there, and that needs really change. And it's a peacekeeping issue, as in the last incident as well.
I agree to what Monica and Carsten said. It is crucial for any functioning federal or decentralized system that entities, the subnational entities, enjoy autonomy, and they not only enjoy autonomy, but also they have the sufficient financial capacities and also the expertise to manage their tasks. And coming back to the role of courts, once again, an example, for this has not to do with climate change, but for example, the European Court of Human Rights leaves it to the discretion of the member states if they allow same-sex marriage or not. Article 8 of the convention. The Austrian Constitutional Court had to check if an Austrian provision in the civil code, which did not allow same-sex marriages, was compatible with Article 8 of the convention, and he said it was not compatible with Article 8. So you have here the restraint of the European Court of Human Rights and I exaggerate, the juridical activism of the Austrian Constitutional Court. And then the Court of the Principality of Liechtenstein had to answer the same question, because the same provision was valid in the Liechtenstein legal order, and he had the same constitutional provision that was Article 8 of the convention, and he came to another result. He said this provision of the civil code did not allow same-sex marriages, was not unconstitutional. I did not take part in this decision, but yes. So you see, we have different approaches, and what we have all, and if constitutional courts intervene too much in politics, they cause risks, and one of these risks that you cause tensions. It may be that the legislator on the federal level or on the regional level does not comply with your decisions. The legislator, does not comply. He does not implement your decisions. And what do you do after that? The functioning of a legal system depends on the political culture. If entities, subnational entities, as well as the entities as the federation level, are accepting the decisions of the courts. And in our legal system, I can say for Austria, yes, as far as I know, was one exception, but this is not not worth to mention in this case. The 9 Länder and the Federation are complying fully with all decisions of the Constitutional Court and all decisions of the courts. And it is a risk if you endanger with too much juridical activism this balance between the powers. And it is very also clear that judges are not democratically legitimated. Democracy is functioning by parliaments and by the people in its decisions.
Yeah, we have time for a second round of questions. We do have a question here and another there.
Good morning, everyone. So she have already asked the question that I have, but I think that I should add a few points on that, because what she have asked the question is pretty much like very much related to what I know. She have asked about the resources, right? Especially right now, if you see in China, they are producing a huge number of electric vehicles in the name of a new energy transition, or like in the name of the green energy, right? So I don't know how like it could be a green when like the local communities are getting affected with the extraction of those minerals. She only mentioned about the cobalt, but not just a cobalt, the lithium is a like key material that is needed for the electric vehicles. So I always think that people should always see the true side of a coin, right? Many of the people, they know about the electric vehicles, but they don't know about how it has been extracted. Like there are a few points that like how for the extraction of the minerals, right, especially for lithium, how the local peoples are getting affected, A, and B, how their human rights are getting violated, and C, how their livelihoods are getting affected. And like all of these are happening in like, are they free and informed consent or not? So all these things have to be looked at, right? There's always the two sides of this. People always see this as a green energy, but then I don't know how like it should be like done. And I have a second question that the Miss Monica have spoke on the importance of the civil society and integrated approach, right? But not necessarily all the countries have the power of the civil society. Some countries might not have a civil society members have not that much power to raise their voice on the policy making table. And especially in Tibet, the local communities, their voices are like never heard on the policy making table, and their voices are neglected, and their traditional values are like given a zero value, like they don't consider their knowledge as important. So how do the voice of the local communities like should be come at the decision making table, like how to, as much as like we talk about the importance of the public participation, many of the scientists academic always talk about the public participation, and all the years we have a COP, like recently they have a COP 28 in Abu Dhabi. So we always talk about the environment, and but in reality, like I don't think it is happening on ground. So my basic question is like, how do the voice of the local communities should be heard in the policy making table?
Thank you for the wonderful session. So I have like two specific question based on a single comment. So I think Professor Monica was talking about additional institutions that are needed to facilitate different cooperation and coordination, and especially the one, that example you gave was interministerial committee. So I would also want to draw something what Professor Peter said about trust and the politics of it. So I mean, even if we look at the context of a large federation like India, we do have a lot of committees like this interstate council that has been mandated by the constitution itself, but we see there is a very less functioning because of the politics behind it and the lack of trust. So one of the questions was, what do you, I mean, if you can cite some example about the institutional attributes to these instruments that can facilitate such coordination. The second question on the same thing is, how have they been deployed? If you have some cases from your own, like I think Forum of Federation has also been involved in India in kind of a dialogue with the Interstate Council. And for example, the third question is related to the second question, but in many cases, like in a large federation, any changes, like a change in bureaucracy within the top level, changes the entire functioning of this interstate council sometimes, and that causes a lot of impediments to build this consensus over a long period of time. So what do you think, how this additional instrument can be strengthened in these things? Yeah, so it's three interrelated questions based on the similar additional instrument to facilitate cooperation and coordination. Thank you so much.
Is there any final questions on the part of the public? Yeah.
Namaste, very good morning. My name is Prof from Nepal. Nepal is a beautiful, small and beautiful country, and landlocked like Austria and Hungary. It has one federal, 7 province, and 753 local governments are totally autonomous, some specific and common power. One thing, I think 15 days ago, one local government, I think metropolitan city Pokhara, has decided to cut the tree to protect the crops and grain from the monkey intervention. In this context, the local governance, if has decided such type of decision which directly affect to the environment, climate change, how could we to believe such type of local government to sustain the federalism to protect the environmental? Have you any comment, suggestion from your side? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Again, very interesting and challenging questions. I think you raise rightly the issue of the climate transition and environmental impacts and human rights impacts that leads. And that happens largely at the international scale, in the sense that you're talking about flows, trade flows between countries. And that's unfortunately something that passes very much well under the radar in many ways. The issues have been raised, and here it is really a matter of responsibility in terms, I think, of supply chains, and actually being able to trace new technology that helps in terms of climate transition to sustainable sources. And we are not yet very good at that. And that is a continuous challenge that is linked to, the discussions we had before in terms of legacies of colonialism, but also existing, if you want, geopolitical conditions in that sense. We have a horrible accounting system in terms of GDP measurements and resources at the moment, where these the environmental and human impacts are not recognized nationally, and that is a way to put things under the carpet. So there is a big movement in climate change which goes under the word of just transitions, which deals with these issues and tries to raise awareness about these issues. And I'd say what you highlight really brings to the front the aspect that climate justice is central to climate change effectiveness. So we can't actually achieve improvement in climate change without climate justice. There's been a lot of debates, and some people think, well, we really have to, it's so urgent, we should just focus on the outcome, which is emission reductions, because we are in such a bad state. We don't really care how we get there, and that is just the wrong approach. How we get there is as important as the aim that we have. And so it's a very hard, issue to solve in many ways, but I think we have to make businesses and governments, we have to hold them to account in that sense through increased transparency of the sources of these new technologies in many ways. So that's what I'd say there. Number two, let me just. About area, about countries where we don't have strong civil society. So that is, in a way, from a environmental, in terms of climate change, there is a double-edged sword here as well. I think in terms of climate change mitigation action, there is a role for central government. You need a central government that is committed to that, first of all, and that the push largely comes from the global level today. So you might not have it, and then you will have very little other opportunities for other parts, other policy actors to actually push government in that sense. But for mitigation, actually, central government push is important, because, as you said, you highlighted the negatives at the local level of mitigation action. There are very little benefits at the local level for mitigation. Now, there are very strong benefits in terms of adaptation, and that is, the need to respond to climate change. Civil society is very important to raise attention to those issues as well. And so I think where you don't have strong civil society, you risk to have less attention to that. So I think what I'd say is that I believe decentralized forms of government and more democratic societies provide more opportunities to actually improve those situations. And so I think we see in a lot of countries, we have seen authoritarian countries move towards democracy, many, over the years. It doesn't happen immediately, but it's possible. And usually that happens because they have first built strong civil society. So in authoritarian countries, it's not that you don't have civil society. You have activists, but they have to operate in the shadows. But they still operate, and they build structures, and over time, they actually, start to carve out their areas as well. Usually they operate in non-political areas officially, but might do a lot of more politically sensitive work on the side. And so I think, in a way, there is more activism than we would know. And that's important in many ways. And it's important to support that, I think. So it's not a full answer, but just some thoughts on that. Can I leave them to the others?
Yes. For me, it's it's a really, we've seen in your questions, in the very good questions, it's very clear that the situation in a lot of the most of the countries in the world is completely different from the situation we are talking about, especially because we are talking about you can say highly developed, industrialized countries with a long history of political struggles and historical struggles, with a long history of decentralized situation which came together with all these kingdoms and Grafschaften, how do you say it in English? How these counties and so on, and they came together to build up a national body. That's completely different from the situation from colonialization or just be yourself, or to have a situation like China with a other history. It's completely different. And so we are talking about this thing of the chance of improvement of getting a better way, a better situation, to get a situation where the people are better up, that their decentralization and federalism might be a good chance, but it wouldn't fit in any country. There are different countries where it would not fit, and it will not fit, of course. I would say. So we have to see this pluralism of ways, and we have to take this in mind. That shows your questions all over very strongly. And I just want to mention one point. You mentioned this, that this aspect that cobalt and all these technologies are not green technologies or green resources by themselves. No, they are not, because they are not renewable. If they are not renewable, you run into the next problem, of course. But on the other hand, if we have the necessity to reduce GHG very fast, we have to develop and we have to use all possibilities of electricity and things. It's a time slot for transition. I would think maybe from now up to 2050 or so. But then you have to develop other techniques, because cobalt and others are endless, and we get this all over the time. And so for a constituency, for a nation who has these resources, it's of course a very sensible issue. For Germany or Europe, who needs it, it's easy. Give it to us so we can manage the change. One of the international conflicts, and Monica was, I agree very much with this point, that the international conferences and the international debate is really the most important thing to give this improvement. And a lot of countries get a possibility to raise their voices there and to give their situation and to present their situation, and to bear in mind to raise the consciousness of the civil society in the highly developed countries. Because in the highly developed countries, the most resources are needed or used by now, and we have to change this to save the world in that way.
The discussion has made it clear for me the relevance of civil society and the municipal level in societies. Yes, we are in a very privileged situation, and this privileged situation is also demonstrated that we have in Austria, for example, 2,100 municipalities. They have all of these municipalities have the same competences. The largest municipality is the capital, Vienna, with nearly 2 million inhabitants. And the smallest municipality is in Tyrol, with about 100 inhabitants. And all they have, guaranteed by constitutional law, financial resources. Clearly, they are never satisfied. They always say we need more, but we have very strong municipalities, and it is also guaranteed by the constitution. And there are always discussions in Austria about merging municipalities. For example, Tyrol, you have very small municipalities, and there are some concerns. If you merge municipalities, you lose maybe one important resource that is not guaranteed by any legal order. That is social capital. There is also research on this topic, how civil society in connection with municipalities can guarantee this existing social capital, and this social capital is that people have some kind of identity, and they are working together and the conflicts. There are always conflicts in societies, also clearly in small societies, but they are working together finally, and the political or societal disputes have not so much consequences. And we are always, but the situation is dynamic. All things are in change, and also the societies in the rural areas of our country are transforming, are changing, and we have always to look to new tools of creating and civil society. And for example, there was developed such a tool, so-called with the German expression Bürgerräte. In the English term is so-called wisdom councils, where you gather people and look and discuss and try to discuss from with representatives of politics, try to discuss topics of relevance, and that people are allowed and can give their expertise to the politicians and to get in a discussion with politics. We have made good experiences. It's not a solution for all problems, but we have good experiences with such Bürgerräten. And that is only one possible option. It is crucial that you have a strong civil society. It's some kind of functional federalism from my point of view, and that you involve civil society into politics, and that's very crucial for a democratic functioning system. And finally, some words also to the aspect of cooperative federalism. It plays a crucial role in regarding climate change and measures against climate change. And our country is not very federalized if you compare it with Switzerland, for example, or even if you compare it with Germany. But we have a very good tradition of cooperative federalism. For example, the distribution of the financial settings is agreed with representatives of the Länder, of the federation, and the municipalities. And finally, the federal legislator passes a law on the Financial Act of Equalization, and it distributes the money, the income of the state by the taxes on the three levels of governance in Austria. And this law is based on an agreement between all levels of government, and it's still working since many decades, since the Second World War. And in this context, we can also discuss or bring in aspects which are relevant for the future. For example, the financial resources against climate change. And so in this context, in this agreement on the financial equalization between federation, Länder and municipalities, it is also an agreement on the distribution on financial matters regarding climate change. And this is, from my point of view, a very important tool, and it brings this it can work better, but it is a important instrument to make the measures against climate change more coherent and to improve the coordination.
I wanted to add one thing. I think the comments on China and Nepal made me think about, and just to highlight, when you think about natural resource management, and historically, we have a lot of examples of self-management of natural resources in the global south, as in the global north, but in the global north are mainly gone today. But in the global south, they're still active, and they exist as management systems with more or less success. But in Nepal, the forestry area is, an example where, social forestry has really originated there and has spread around the world. Now, these systems are not perfect, but they are based on democratic principles. They're based on consensus decision-making. And these are all local systems, if you want. And in that regard, I think modern governments, which have, originated as very much top-down, need to learn a lot from these local realities. And it is also, and that is also a call for devolution, if you want, and to trust local and customary institutions, and recognizing local knowledge. And so that is something that I think governments need to improve more, if you want, and embracing a more open form of governance, if you want. But there are a lot of examples, but they need to be recognized and being given authority from above as well, instead of stifled, if you want. I don't know if it's a partial answer, but I just wanted to add that in a way.
So thanks a lot. I won't even try to wrap up this very rich discussion. I would only limit myself to thank you for your active engagement, and of course, thank the speakers for their interesting points and also for their willingness to engage with the questions raised by the public. So thank you very much. I hope we had a good discussion, and we enriched the debate on climate change and federalism today. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Federica, for moderating this